Great skills again by him. Oh, marvellous goal by Lewis.
Welcome to the Rangers Journey.
Evening, folks. Hope you're all well. Monday the 13th of October. If you're anything like me, you've removed Atomic Kitten from your playlist. Sadly disappointed over the weekend there. Head is well and truly in the bin. We're all raging. We're all wondering what's going to go on. But by the looks of things, we'll be adding on the Oasis song Roll With It to the playlist. So I guess it's just a case of just wait and see at this moment in time, as everything was quite quiet today, guys. But I'm joined by a fantastic panel tonight. I've got Ross, Andrew and Doug there. Ross, we'll come to you first. We'll go clockwise for this one. How are you getting on the day, pal?
Kevin, you're the one. You still turn me on. The league click's coming home again. I'm alright, yeah. Try to stay positive. I think by this point we were all hoping to have a guy in place. But, of course, Rangers will do Rangers things and we trundle on another week.
Yep. Andrew, how was work this weekend, mate? Everything okay?
Aye, not too bad. Obviously scunnered on Saturday night seeing the messages come through. It was like deja vu once again. But feeling in a little bit of a better place now. But it is still a bit of an unknown, isn't it? So, but yeah, no, feeling good, mate. Feeling good. Good to see you all. All the better for that.
Good. Doug, a wee bit of change of scenery for you tonight, mate?
Indeed, making up for when I disappointed Mitch and said I didn't like dogs. I'm looking after a dog for my friend and his two cats, so I'm at his house at the moment. Well, they're on a family holiday. It's all right for some.
Brilliant. Well, guys, I'm going to run through the candidates, much like we did last night. Obviously, slightly different panel tonight. I think it's only me and Ross that were on last night. So for those that tuned in, I'm going to be doing the most of the host. And I've got pretty much everything I wanted to say off my chest last night, so I'll let the guys put their stuff in. But I'm going to kind of ask you to score. So we're going to go through Rowe, McInnes, Carrick and McKenna tonight. I'd like you to give me a score kind of out of 10. I'm going to ask you for one thing you think would be good about them and one kind of thing you think would be bad about them, and obviously try not repeat each other and overlap each other. And then once you're happy with that, give me a score out of 10 and how much you think you should be the Rangers manager. For example, if you'd asked me about Steven Gerrard last week and they gave you an 11 out of 10, for example. So give me a realistic kind of overview on it, and then everyone that's on the comments, everyone that's kind of watching, feel free to chuck your score in, what you think about the things, and one good thing and one bad thing. So, Ross, we'll come to Danny Rowe first of all. Give me one good thing about Danny Rowe and why he should be considered to be the next Rangers manager.
I mean, we did speak about it in depth last night, and one thing I thought was an incredibly positive point about Danny Rowe was the experience that he's had working in high-pressure environments. And I know that it's difficult to translate working from coaching to management, as Michael Beale obviously found out to our detriment. But, you don't work it, for the Red Bull Group, and especially at Bayern Munich, and be successful as you are under, like a manager like Hansi Flick, if you don't have something about you. And he's clearly a very, very a good coach. Everybody says good things about him. So, he's definitely got a lot of positives about him, despite the fact that he's young and he's inexperienced. But, you've got to take the positives out of it.
Okay, mate. And one bad thing, one thing there, maybe you've already just said it.
Yeah, well, it's the lack of experience. He is a young coach, and sometimes I think, I don't know if it's always prominent, but I think sometimes younger coaches might struggle to get the respect of players who are, maybe only, there's guys in that team that are maybe only 3 or 4 years younger than him and have played football, at a much higher level than he ever has. And I think sometimes, especially at this level, he perhaps struggled to gain the respect a little bit more. But his credentials, I think, for where he's worked, are probably something that he can point to.
So a lack of kind of leadership credentials maybe is what you're kind of aiming towards.
Yeah, probably leadership experience, perhaps.
Okay, pal, give me a mark out of 10 for him.
I'd say a 6.5.
Okay, no problem. Put a curveball in there. How am I meant to count in halves? Come on, give a break, mate. Yeah,
Make it 7 round up. Make it 7 round up then.
Thank you. Yeah. I did go to a good school, by the way, just before people start asking what kind of school I went to, right? Anyway, Andrew. a good thing for Danny Rowe, please, mate. A good positive and a score, please, pal.
A good, positive, obviously, his background. I think also working with the German national team, not just Bayern Munich. I think it's at the higher levels of football. Granted, he's not been the main coach, but he's obviously learnt from a lot of good coaches around him. obviously did very well, which I say very well. He did well at Sheffield Wednesday for the situation that they were in. A lot of the fans do speak highly of him. The thing for me that's the more positive is his style of play. I think he's a little bit more attacking. You know, you might look at a Russell Martin. I know I don't really want to say his name, but I'll put 50p in the jar for that. But he talked about this transition, about moving the ball forward, and it obviously was a lot more control in the game, possession based. Roles not like that. He'd rather take about 4 touches and get the ball into the other area. So that's more of a positive. Very similar to a lot of kind of modern managers now with the kind of 4-2-3-1 and things. But for me, it's the kind of attacking high press that he's got. I think he's just got the more attractive version of that, and I think the more effective version. Again, I think the negative for it is this is a little bit of an unknown at a club like Rangers. Yes, he's been a coach at Germany, Bayern Munich, but it's a different kettle of fish. You have to win every week. It's a high pressure cooker. If you're down Wonderbar doing a bit of dancing, you're going to be on, you're going to be in the papers the next day. You can't really do much in this city. Can he handle that being a young guy? That'll be the one. Out of 10, I'd probably say he's about a 7, and that's again a bit of an unknown because it's just Rangers are just such a kind of unique club. But I would probably say about a 7 at the minute.
Okay, mate, thank you. We'll add this in here. So that's for both of you. Doug, same question to you, mate. A positive thing, a negative thing, and give me a score for Danny Rowe, please. Why you believe, not necessarily as a manager, but suitability to be the next Rangers manager out of 10?
Well, one of the things I really like about him is his adaptability. I think he's got that ability that Gio had, where he can look at a game and change things in the game, and you actually see a real strong outcome from it. I forget the game exactly, but there was one match in particular where the team were 3-0 down, and he changed the formation about 3 or 4 times throughout the game, and got the team back into that match by making changes as things went on. So I would mark that as a positive. Negative. I'm trying to think of one that's not already been said. The obvious one is obviously the lack of experience, but yeah, I mean, it's really I think it's just the main one. I don't think he has a lot of negatives, to be honest. I think that, as I say, he's got a huge amount of experience, even though not as a manager. Almost 15 years worth, which counts for something. A lot of people, I feel, are really kind of writing that off, kind of focusing just on the period of time with Sheffield Wednesday. But there's a lot of experience in there, and we've had managers come in before, not to poke the bear, but Walter Smith, who didn't have managers' experience but had a wealth of experience as an assistant and in other roles in the game. But yeah, to be honest, I can't really think of many major downfalls other than, as I say, that lack of experience as the number one, just because I do think there are aspects of that are important to being the Rangers manager. So I can only really echo that one.
Give me your score then, pal. Give me your score.
I'd give him a solid 7.5.
What did I just say about half scores? Right, okay.
Sorry, okay, I give him
no, 21.5. Okay, 21.5. That'll do. Right, okay, no problem at all. Well, guys, I think one of the things that I'd spoken about was one of the things I wanted for the next manager was a leader. Somebody who had basically produced leadership qualities. I think you've all touched on there that his lack of experience there is probably going to be something there. But are we likely to find, I'll come to you first of all on this one, Ross, are we likely to find somebody with real strong leadership qualities that is going to be willing to work in the current model that we have, where we have somebody who's basically going to be making the vast majority of the football decisions above him, and probably, like we're led to believe, going to be picking the players that he's going to sign?
I think that's part of the issue. I think it's probably not unfair to assume that was part of the reason why Steven Gerrard didn't want to work for the current Rangers structure. But that's the way that the board have decided to move Rangers forward as a club. They think that, as opposed to having one guy with far more power and influence, they think that it's easier or it's more efficient for it to be almost this, I don't know what's the term you would use, a committee almost of there's a couple of guys in there who sign off on decisions. I don't think And I don't think that the manager or head coach would be, omitted, from decisions on making players. But it's there's guys that are scouted to say this is what you've looked for in a player. You're going to take him whether you really think he can fit in or not. So it is really difficult, and like you say, it's hard to be a leader and to have to follow other people. Do you know what I mean? And that's one of the issues that we as a support, I think we've probably learned more so over the last few weeks, that the Rangers manager or head coach or whatever it is, the public face of Rangers needs to be a leader with some degree of aura and presence, and regardless of their ability to scout players, whatever, they need to have that ability to make players want to work for them. And that's kind of one of the concerns I've got at the moment, is a lot of the guys that we've been linked with, I'm not sure if they've got it to the level that we require at the moment.
Yep, Andrew, I can see you nodding away there. Do you think this is the right model for us? Do you think this is the model that we should be following as far as a head coach rather than a manager? The Kevin Thelwell, Patrick Stewart thing at this moment in time. Do you think this is the correct model moving forward that we should be following?
I think it's the model that most football clubs follow now, because it's easier for succession planning and things like that. I don't know. I'm very middle of the road with it. I think we all want an old school manager who wants his players for the team. I just feel this is the way most clubs go down now, because I think it helps with profitability and things like that. When you've got somebody who's a head coach, the transition in theory should be much easier to your next candidate. You'll have your philosophy, your style. Again, use the word philosophy, but obviously it's been grossly misused by certain managers. But you can continue. There's an easier continuation of what you want to do as a club by having that model. Granted, we've not seen a lot of fruits from it in recent years when we've kind of looked at this and variations of this, but it is modern football, and I think it is here to stay. Give me 4-4-2 and a Walter Smith style manager and I'll be happy. But football's moved on from that now, unfortunately, and this is very likely here to stay. As I say, the positive from that is you've got that the succession planning should be easier, but as we're seeing right now, they've barely put any foundations in because our manager left after 100 odd days because of what's happened. So yeah, it's probably the worst example of it, to be fair.
Yep. Well, there's kind of two ways of looking at this from my kind of side of things, right? And it's Russell Martin's going to be quite easy for us to replace. It's very obvious he's going to be easy to replace. But even in such circumstances, we lose a manager who we think will go into so-called bigger and better things if they leave the club. In theory, it should be quite easy to replace the manager because all the building blocks are still within there. And I think if we look at, we're talking about leadership, and you specifically name Walter Smith there, and kind of instrumental guys who have got statues outside of stadiums. And I pointed back to Walter Smith, and we've obviously mentioned Sir Alex Ferguson there. And what happens when you remove the biggest block out of the building? The building falls apart. And you look at the way Rangers have gone since times of Walter Smith, and you look at the way massive clubs like Manchester United have gone when they removed Sir Alex Ferguson, that I think clubs bring in this kind of model to try and protect themselves. And I don't think we're maybe following it as well as what we could do. But I think they can understand why it's happening this way. But I still believe that we need to have somebody that's got a little bit more about them than, like Sir Russell Martin did. He's a wee bit, maybe just a bit more of a likeable character, a wee bit more kind of easy on the eye and easy on the ears. But I can understand why it's been done like this. But whether we agree with that or not, that's it. Doug, we'll move on to Derek McInnes now. And we'll go back into our kind of scores again and stuff like that. So we're obviously, for those that have just joined us, we're basically scoring the managers out of 10 on their suitability to be the next Rangers manager. We've ran through Danny Rowe first of all, and he scored a 21.5 out of 30 between the panel here of how suitable they believe he says to be the next Rangers manager. Doug, moving on to Derek McInnes, give me something that we believe would be positive about him, something you think would be negative about him, and give me a score, please.
Well, the big positive is he knows Scottish football inside and out. He's obviously got a long career, having both played and managed in Scotland. He's managed multiple teams in Scotland. He knows the media, he knows the referees, he knows all of that stuff that we consider to be kind of unique to our game, and something unique that the manager needs to deal with. So I think that's one of the, obviously, his big positives, and something that a lot of fans, are crying out for in a manager as well. There's a lot of fans that want a manager that knows about Scottish football, or at least they perceive that they know about Scottish football. So I think that's a big box that he ticks in that regard. In terms of negative, he's got limited experience in Europe. Probably one of the negatives I'd say. He does have some. He has managed, I think, around about 40 plus European qualifiers between the Conference League and the Europa League, but he's never gone out with the qualifiers, so he's never sort of managed in the competitions proper. So there is some experience there, but as I say, it's all qualifiers, and unfortunately, as I say, not overly successful. But that's in part obviously down to the teams that he's been managing, and not just him. So I wouldn't count that as a negative in and of itself. So I'll put those two things up as starter for tens. And in terms of a mark out of 10, I would probably give him a, what did I say for 7.5? So I'll give him a 7.
Thanks, pal. Talking about European success and his lack of experience, if I was to give you a choice in an ideal world, would you give up European success over the next kind of 2-3 seasons to try and steady the ship to bring domestic success?
I mean, if you're guaranteeing domestic success, then I suppose so.
There's no such thing in football, mate. But
then
focusing your efforts on domestic success, and basically looking at European as a bonus.
Well, I mean, I think we should be focusing on domestic success anyway. But personally, I wouldn't give it up, because, like I say, it wouldn't guarantee success anyway. And plus, I'm of the opinion that our European form, and in particular our good European form, is a contributor to getting better domestic success, because that will allow us to attract better players. It will get us better commercial deals, which will get us more money, which will allow us to buy better players, and better players will win the league. So I consider it a component of helping us win the league. But I mean, I think every Rangers fan, obviously, if you could guarantee it, obviously they would say, yeah, no, that's fine. In Europe, if we're going to win the league, yeah, that's fine.
Ross, move on to Danny McInnes now, pal. What's your thoughts, mate?
I've come round to the idea of it more, and I don't know if it's because of the state that we're in that I've accepted it more, that Derek McInnes could and probably should be involved. Should, other candidates perhaps not be interested, but it's a difficult one because, like you say, he's got the most experience of any guy that's been linked with the Scottish game. He knows it inside and out as a player, as a manager. He's worked at different levels within the Scottish game. He's actually been quite decent at turning clubs around in Scotland, if that makes sense, because Aberdeen were a bit kind of all over the place, and he made them consistently, sitting at that kind of top bit, getting in the cup finals. I know we were a bit all over the place, but he still had to do that. Obviously, you can question his ability to win the cup finals and seriously challenge a depleted Celtic at the time, but he was, he'd done a decent job there. He went into Kilmarnock, who were a bit of a disaster, and rebuilt them back up again. He took them back up out of the Championship, and he's now doing a great job at Hearts, and he's probably proven now that with Hearts and obviously what they've got behind them with Tony Bloom and the Jamestown data analysis, that he can actually use tools that if he's given a little bit more money and he's given better tools, then he can clearly work a better job than opposed to what he was probably been given for years at Aberdeen, who were obviously a kind of bit of a stringent club before the Americans arrived. So he's clearly proven that he can work within that, but I understand is obviously the lack of top table experience in Europe. Like we're saying, I don't mean in terms of the Champions League, but I mean like playing in that group stage European football as a manager. I think he said he played in like 30 odd qualifiers and he's only won, I don't know, 10 of them or something. So I understand that you've got to perhaps sacrifice a bit of the European experience, but he understands that he was there as a player. He played for this as a player at that level. Do you know what I mean? So you have to think about that as well, that he understands Rangers. He's a Rangers supporter. He's a Rangers guy. And I know that's a bit of an easy cop-out because it's the old he gets it argument. But, when it comes to guys like that who've worked with, the best that we've seen, the best that we compare them to is obviously Walter Smith. He was kept under Dick Advocaat. He played under Dick Advocaat as well. People seem to forget that Dick Advocaat trusted him in games. I think obviously the famous one was PSV Eindhoven in the Champions League. he was trusted and he's worked under two completely different kind of managers. And he's obviously had the opportunity to go and manage in Scotland. He did have a spell in England, didn't go too well, but that's okay. He's obviously learned from it. And he's clearly now in a manager, and I used the phrase last night on trajectory. He's a manager that I think at the moment is in a bit of an upwards trajectory. So for me, I would be happy if Derek McInnes back, but it's one of those things, is that how would we be able to go and bring him in if Hearts would be difficult to deal with?
Do you think, is that your kind of negative side of it, that you think this could end up just being a bloody circus trying to get him to come along there, mate? Because we've seen how hard Hearts can be to deal with in the past. They're not a club who I would say are financially in any difficulty at the moment, obviously under fan ownership now. They seem to be pretty strong leadership-wise at the board. Like my worry is that it could just end up turning into a circus, and he has to hand in the equivalent of a transfer request to try and make it happen if he does end up being the guy that we want.
I'm not 100% sure about that, just based on the way that the other clubs that have been run by Tony Bloom have been, that they're very, very quick they'll make the sale and get the next guy in. You've seen the way that the player trading at Brighton was, that they're just happy to get the guy, get him in, get them playing the way that we want, sell him on for a profit, and then go and bring the next guy in. So I don't doubt for a minute that they'll have already had the contingency in place, because Derek McInnes was already there kind of before Tony Bloom's involvement was official. So, but he's obviously got to have a say in that, but he could have very easily, went, listen, we're taking this in a different direction, and sacked him. So they obviously think there's something about him to keep him there. But what they'll probably want to do is they will have a conveyor belt or an idea of basically already who's the next guy, which we should have had. We should have already had the contingencies in place. But that's the way these club groups work, is they do have this conveyor belt. So I don't think they would be worried about losing them. What they can do is they can obviously offer a financial burden to us that we have to pay. So in terms of that, the problem I would have with it would be more, are you kind of starting to simplify things again? Because you could at times be a bit notorious for keeping it simple, but we can't do the simple stuff at the moment. So I know I'm completely counteracting my negative point here, but I don't think it's always going to be the prettiest football. But I'd want him in, because I think he could get the results that we're at the moment aren't getting.
Cool. Give me a score.
I'll say an 8.
An 8. Okay. Andrew, one concern I've got over Derek McInnes, it's not a new name. Danny Rowe's a relatively new name when it comes to football. Some of these other ones, like Kieran McKenna's obviously emerged out the woodwork in the last few years. Derek McInnes isn't a new name. It's not a name that Rangers fans haven't heard of. Why now? Why was it not, years ago when supposedly he knocked us back because, there was certain circumstances at the time didn't happen? Why is the timing right for McInnes now? Is it purely that it's good for him and that he's reached a certain level that would qualify him to be the Rangers manager? Or is it that we've went down the way so far that now that qualifies him because we're low rather than he's high?
I think it depends how you look at it. I think as well, you can look at the situation that when we were looking at him before, the club was, I think, a bit more of a basket case than it is now. Granted, we still aren't great, but we do have some serious financial backing behind us now. So I think things are different. There's been a lot of money invested in the squad this year. There's also, as you say, things have changed to that point, and I think there's been a lot of realisation within the fan base that there isn't a hell of a lot out there that we are going to attract. And I think the reality is it's either a project manager, somebody like Gerrard when he started out in management. It was a big name, somebody that players could look up to. But if he had been manager at Dortmund or Liverpool, you'd never get him at Rangers. So we are in that situation now. The thing for me is, what's kind of ready-made with McInnes now? And I think a lot of fans are realising this once we've kind of gone through the conveyor belt of managers, is McInnes kind of designed a way to play against us. So if you can't beat him, join him. So, it doesn't matter what side he's had, whether it be Aberdeen, whether it be Kilmarnock, he's always taken points off us one way or another. So if you can't beat him, join him. He designed a way to play against us, so he'll know how to unlock these teams, in the league. And it is a bit, like Ross says, it's a little bit simplistic in the sense that he will get more out of these players. He knows the league. You're not then waiting 6 months for a manager to come in and discover what Scottish football is really like and not really get the physicality until it's there in your face. McInnes would start off well right away, and I think that's the thing. Whereas with some of these other managers, especially like, for example, a Danny Rowe, could very well be good. There's a lot of positives from the stuff he's done and the teams he's been involved with, but it might take him 6-7 months to kind of get there. Do we want to wait for that? I don't know if we can at the minute, but in a weird sense, so we probably can, because we could argue the league is probably done. So yeah, I think McInnes has, now he's been at quite a few clubs, I think he has shown that he can manage clubs well, and what he did getting Kilmarnock back up into the Premier League, that was good as well, because that was a little bit of a slightly different situation from him. And you look at Hearts now, obviously with Tony Bloom's investment, Hearts are flying. They really are at the minute, and they look a little bit unstoppable. And that, in a sense, could be a little bit of a barrier, because do you want to really leave that right now? I don't know. But if you're looking for a negative, it's the unknown with European football, I think. I know that's probably been mentioned, but yeah, it would depend. And I think, as Ross has touched on as well, I think the football wouldn't be the most attractive, but we would be a more cohesive side and we would win games, and that is the simple one. As a rating, I'd probably go a 7 as well, I think, for McInnes. I don't think he's a terrible choice by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's shown people more now as well what he can do. So,
Yep. Doug, just before we move on to the next sort of topic there, McInnes, I believe, would probably regard himself as an established, experienced manager, given that he's been as long in the game as what he has. Do you believe that he would be willing to work in this model? My fear is that he turns around and says that the timing's not right, which is what we've just been kicked between the legs with just in the last week or so. But there's every possibility McInnes could turn around and just say exactly the same thing to us, and truth be told, you wouldn't blame him. But do you believe that he could actually work within this model and be a head coach rather than the club manager?
Yes, and I think any manager can, because I personally think people drive far too big a wedge between these two concepts. First and foremost, how long, I mean, when you think of this idea of the manager, the traditional manager, I mean, how long has it been since there were many people who actually properly fit that mold? It's been years. We're talking like 10, 20 years since we had like frequent amounts of people that actually fit that mold. You get some that have an aspect of that because they're, I think, just because of their age. So if you take, for example, Gerrard, for example, he's coming from an era that had managers like that, so he has that kind of idea. But even Gerrard, I don't think is the quote unquote manager that people sometimes paint him to be, in terms of, he can work under a structure, because that's largely what he's doing. He's obviously started at Liverpool to have that kind of structure. We had that structure while he was here. He worked under directors of football while he was here. And I don't think it's quite as black and white as people paint it. You can have degrees of compromise between that. So someone could come in, a Gerrard or McInnes, say, who maybe is a little bit more sort of rooted in the old school, for lack of a better phrase, and they could say, I would like to have a bit of more say in transfers than just you handing me players that you just give me. I'd like to be able to see them first, and I'd like you to give me options, and I'll pick out of the options, for example, rather than you just give me folks. That's part of what the negotiations will be, is discussing these things, and the club going out. So that, this is kind of a hierarchy. What are your expectations? Here are our expectations, and then you work out the lines in between that. So I think there's scope for pretty much any manager to fit in to whatever setup we're going to have. And like Andrew said earlier, that's the setup of the majority of football clubs nowadays, because there's too much money and there's too much risk in terms of business for that one man to have control over, the entire club. You just can't do that nowadays, because well, certainly not at the highest levels anyway. It's fine at smaller levels where it's more desirable because you can't employ 101 people to do 101 things. But we're up at our level where we're playing. I think that is it. That's the standard now. That is what most clubs are working to some degree. And as I say, there are degrees within that. And I think any manager could fit into that. It's just about finding the right compromises between the two parties involved, and wherever those right compromises are made, that'll be the person that gets the job.
Yeah, I think probably a good example to maybe look at, and I know this is going to piss a lot of people off, excuse my language, Michael Beale and the amount of jobs that he was doing at one time and how things basically fell apart around him, where he was doing absolutely everything. And it just became basically obvious he just had too much on his plate. And it just fell. And it wasn't so much that he wasn't good enough. I believe that he was good enough to be the Rangers manager, but he had to be accountable to somebody. He had to have somebody like a director, experienced director of football above him, asking him why he's doing certain things, asking him why he's making certain decisions and stuff. Whereas at that moment in time, he was given basically the keys to the kingdom at that point. Ross, I'm going to come on to you. I'm going to ask you this question. This is one coming from Curry, mate. You've scored Derek McInnes higher than the rest of the boys here. Curry's got a question. If Derek McInnes wasn't sitting top of the table, was not sitting top and was sitting mid-table, would we be as keen? Would have caught the eye as much as what he has?
Obviously, I think it's the easy answer to that is no. But what Derek McInnes, and as I said at the time, what he has been consistent in the time that he's been in charge of Scottish clubs, is that he continuously sets his teams up in a way that we don't at the moment. We're routinely, I'm just thinking about us as a football team at the moment, and I understand Derek McInnes isn't the most attractive option. I totally understand why people wouldn't want him. I didn't want him for a long time, but when you're watching us and you've watched us for the last 6 months, or actually it's been longer than that, to be honest, but you watch us and how bad we are and how we're just absolutely all over the place. We're a total mess. When have you ever seen a Derek McInnes team that that played like that? Very, very rarely have we seen that. Probably in his time with Aberdeen when they struggled to beat Celtic, but that was a dominant Celtic team that nobody could beat. There was a season in there that they went unbeaten, so you have to be realistic about that. But Derek McInnes would go in there and immediately organises, and like I say, it wouldn't be the most attractive football, no chance. But the state that we're in and the negligence that the training has been put on the players, it's been an embarrassment, and that wouldn't happen with Derek McInnes. At this moment in time, I just want a Rangers that can win games and actually look like they know how to play a little bit of football. They can defend and be structured and cohesive, and actually at least know that they know what they're doing. Because how many times this season have we looked at games and gone, they don't know what they're doing? And then it comes to the last 10 minutes, it became a bit of a thing where it was just, let's throw every attacker on and try and scrape a goal. And they're like, they don't know what they're doing. It was an embarrassment, and I don't think you would ever get that with Derek McInnes. And that's why I think that. I just think that he's a manager that, whilst he's not spectacular, you'll at least have a team there that will be cohesive and know what to do.
Yeah, definitely. Andrew, come at you. The next two we're probably going to skim over because I truly don't believe they're actually legitimate candidates, to be honest. So Michael Carrick is another name that's been kind of flung about. A positive, a negative, if you can find a positive, being honest. And a score, please, pal.
Well, a positive, in a sense, he's kind of followed the kind of Steven Gerrard trajectory, hasn't he, a little bit, being involved with Manchester United under... was it Solskjaer? I can't remember now. Did okay there. Really did prove his worth at Middlesbrough. Really did go on a fantastic unbeaten run with them. Unfortunate to lose in the playoffs. So he's definitely got something about him. A negative, again, could he be the right suit for Rangers? I don't know. But, Middlesbrough, when he was there, they're a very big club. They've got some expectations. Obviously, they're not the club that they once were. I'd probably say a 5, just because of I think the experience is a little bit lacking there. It looks like a good manager, and I think we'll go on to have a very decent career, but it was a little bit like Lampard a couple of years ago. I think it was just very unsure because it could go kind of one or two ways now, I think. But he did very well there at Middlesbrough, just lost out in the playoff. Could he be a decent manager for us? He could possibly be, but I think we're in a situation now where we have to get this right. We can't have another project. I think that's the reality of it.
Thanks, pal. Doug, yourself, mate. Keep it brief if you can, mate.
Yeah, I think he's obviously spent his entire career at, playing at the highest levels. He's got a lot of experience in that regard, which I think could transfer to other players. Although not quite the same aura as Gerrard, I'm sure he would, be able to get respect from a lot of the younger players that would have seen him when they were growing up. The obvious one is just his overall lack of experience in terms of coaching, just in general, because he's not really been coaching for that long. And it's all, as I say, it was largely all kind of under the wing at United as well, which it's not a negative, but unlike say Danny Rowe, who's got managerial experience across multiple places. So for me, it's just a little bit like Andrew said. What he has is positive. There's just not quite enough of it for me. So nothing against him, and this doesn't say he's a bad coach or anything, but in terms of should he be the next manager, he's down at sort of a 2 or 3 for me.
Well, we go 2.5.
We'll say 3. I'll give him a 3. He got them. He got Middlesbrough to the first cup final in ages as well. So I'll give him an extra half of that.
Right, I need Tipex. Right, okay. What's on to you, mate?
No, not for me. I just think if we're talking about guys, coaches from that part of the world, I said last night, I'm fed up with every guy that we're linked with coming and playing, being managers from the Championship. And Michael Carrick's a guy that his playing career has probably given him more opportunities than others. And don't get me wrong, he was obviously had a very good apprenticeship working under good coaches. I think he started his coaching badges under Jose. Can I ask a better guy to learn from? And Solskjaer, who I actually think got a bit of a bad rep at Manchester United. He's actually still a very decent guy and a decent coach. But I'm not sold on going to another out of work Championship manager and giving them the keys to the kingdom at the moment. And I know it's a hard one to paint a positive and a negative. I mean, like I say, he's clearly a decent coach, but at the moment, I think we just need to go somewhere different and give somebody else a chance from a different market.
Thanks, pal. Give your score.
A 1.
Okay, no bother.
Really not for me.
Aye. Move on to a guy that I'll be honest, I don't really know much about, so I'm very much in the kind of you're learning here, Andrew. Kieran McKenna, former Ipswich manager, another one that's again somebody else, Championship style manager, out of work, looking for jobs, probably throwing CVs in there left, right, and centre. Talk to me about him.
Well, that's the thing. Again, I remember obviously Ipswich being in the Premier League last year. They didn't look too good. Obviously, they've stuck with him. He did get a win just the other day, wasn't it, over Norwich for the first time in God knows how many years. I was quite surprised about that. Northern Irish, does that tick a box? I don't know. To me, I feel we're at a stage now where it's an unknown. His managerial career has been at Ipswich. Granted, he's been there since 2021, so he's managed to instill his way of playing. He did get them promoted, and that's a very difficult thing for a team like Ipswich to do. It's kind of in that kind of Carrick mode a little bit. Not well known as a footballer in that kind of comparison. Is he somebody that could do really well at Rangers? I think he might understand Scottish football a little bit more. He played out in Northern Ireland, didn't he? So I think he'll probably understand it a little bit more, because a lot of people from there did watch the league a lot. Again, there's a lot of names being thrown around. Anybody that's shown any sort of promise or glimmers. Is it time for him to move on from there? Possibly, but I think Rangers is too much of a big leap. I think he'd have to go somewhere else first. So for me, it's just his career so far. As a score, I'd probably say a 3. Did well getting them promoted, but yeah, that's it really.
Okay, Doug, yourself, mate.
He's another kind of sort of middle of the pack one, I think. He spent time at good clubs. He spent time at Man United, coaching there. He spent time coaching at Tottenham. I think he was at Leicester, Nottingham Forest as well. So he's been at a good number of clubs. He has done phenomenally well, sort of overall with Ipswich, back-to-back promotions, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. Obviously, much more difficult in the Premiership. But I think that's just as much a mark of the resources available to Ipswich as much as it may be his coaching abilities. So positives, I think, obviously, let's say the back-to-back promotions was an excellent feat. He's meant to be really good, I think, in terms of pulling the team together and creating that kind of really us against the world kind of vibe, which I think sort of helped them in that sort of battling up. So that's a positive I'd give him. Negatives, I think it's kind of the same. It's just very short career and only with the one club. So that's probably the main negative. Is he is all that goodness because he managed to get just a good bubble going in one place? We've seen that before. Some managers just get something good going with a club. So that could be the negative. So for him, I'd probably give him I'd say a 6.
Okay. Thanks, Doug. What's trying to offer us, pal?
Kieran McKenna's a bit of a funny one, actually, because, like you say, it was a guy that 12 months ago was absolutely running high. He was linked with Manchester United. He pulled Ipswich through back-to-back promotions, back up to a position that they as a fans and like I said last night, probably them as a club, I think perhaps belong as at the kind of the top table. I think they're historically, they have won a European trophy. They've won more in English football than a lot of clubs who currently sit in the Premier League. So I think they're entitled to think that they should be up there, and he took them up there. What he kind of failed to is that kind of small period of time where the promoted clubs seemed to be almost automatically doomed by a refusal to kind of learn from their mistakes, as the previous custodian of Rangers learned to his detriment. But yeah, so it's funny. It's quite weird that kind of 12 months later, Ipswich have kind of, I don't know if they've maybe just kind of resorted back to probably where the club, not where the fans think they should be, but probably where they are in terms of finances and resources stuff. They are currently sitting, I think they're sitting 8th or 9th in the Championship, and Kieran McKenna seems to be quite comfortable there as well. So perhaps it's one of those things that it's just maybe it's just the right guy in the right place, and he's just he's maybe just going to be one of those guys that could be there with the bricks for a few years, and just he was at that point they were just riding the crest of a wave, and he was a kind of young new manager that's come in. So it's a difficult one to say. I don't think so. I mean, if you want to talk about him come from Northern Ireland, if you want to start throwing that part of it, I don't know enough about him, but I don't know too many Kierans from Northern Ireland that support Rangers, if I'm being brutally honest with you. So it's difficult. I'm sure there's plenty of them, but we don't know that kind of side of it. Does he understand the culture? Does he understand it in a negative light? We don't know. These are all things that I think we talk about. Derek McInnes getting it. Would somebody like that perhaps get it on the other side? I don't know. It's things that you do have to think about. You have to think about them as people as well. But in terms of a manager, he's clearly a talented coach. But I think that at the moment you probably have to think about it in the reason of why was he getting linked with big jobs 12 months ago. And once Ipswich went down, that was probably the time to go and prize him, and perhaps give him the opportunity to go somewhere else. And maybe it's his loyalty to Ipswich has kept him there. And I think he's probably on at the moment in his career, perhaps just sitting kind of he's plateaued a little bit. So I think what we're probably better doing is just kind of perhaps giving that one a little bit of a miss at the moment, if I'm being honest with you. So, but like I say, he's clearly a good coach. And I think he's probably going to get a decent job, but at the moment, I don't think he's the kind of guy that we need. And again, like I say, it's a guy that's linked from the Championship. The only thing, the last thing I would say is that he's probably one that I don't mind being linked with, because most of the guys that we talk about are out of work. And that's something that concerns me, is that these guys are out of work for a reason. If you're going and hiring a manager, it's nice to actually be going to try and to be linked with guys who are currently in jobs. Derek McInnes is in a job. Kieran McKenna's in a job, perhaps other names that have been thrown out that are in jobs. Danny Rowe's probably slightly different. His circumstances at Sheffield Wednesday are slightly different, but that is a positive that we're perhaps even loosely being linked with guys who are actually currently still in work.
I've got a quick wee question if I had it, Ross. Do you think it could be considered a positive that someone's a Celtic fan coming in, or has been, because you could make the argument that they'll get it? From the basis that we've had players that have come in who have apparently been Celtic fans in the past and been good players. So could you have the same thing with a manager?
Well, I understand. I totally get that. I really, really, totally get that. I don't know. But how? Yes. By the way, we've had guys. One of my favourites who actually wore this top, Neil McCann. Was a Celtic supporter for Port Glasgow. Maurice Johnson, Chris Bart, Ross McCormick. These are all guys that have played and contributed for Rangers to varying levels, who were well-known Celtic supporters, and there's Rangers supporters who've played for the other side as well. I don't know. I just think there's something a little bit different to being, the kind of head honcho as opposed to being a cog in the wheel, if I'm being honest with you. And I just don't think, it's bad enough that, I think there's still some guys that have never forgiven the club for signing Maurice Johnson. And I think if we appointed a dying Celtic supporter, I think they would, it would be, riots. I think Ryan's done well to keep muted, if I'm being honest with you. I think he's probably jumping at the bit. For me, no, I have to. That's probably where I've got to draw the line.
Thanks, pal. Give me your score for Kevin McKenna, please. Kieran McKenna, sorry.
I'll say a 5.
5. Okay, no worries. So that gives him, 11, 14. Right, scores in the doors. Here we go. Right, last place. Won't surprise you, Michael Carrick, 9. Kieran McKenna, 14. Danny Rowe, 21.5. Derek McInnes won it tonight, 22. All right. Feel free to chuck some other names in, guys. We've seen Muscat. Seems a lot of favour for Barry Ferguson, which I'm surprised about, considering he won the hard games during his interim period but lost the easy games. Didn't win a game at Ibrox, obviously. The 3-2 win at Parkhead was phenomenal. Out in Fenerbahce as well, winning 3-2 was it 3-1, sorry, was great as well. But I struggle to get past the fact that we lost 2-0 at home to Motherwell and 2-0 at home to St Mirren. Just kind of makes me wonder. But obviously he's picked up somebody else's toolbox in a bad situation. So maybe. Guys, speaking about Barry Ferguson, possibility we're going to have an interim manager come the weekend. Andrew, I'll come to you first. How important is it that we have a manager in place by Saturday?
I think it is important. Obviously, Rangers put out the tweet this morning that Stevie Smith was taking training, which I might have read too much into because I thought, that probably means there's not going to be an announcement today. They've had a couple of weeks to look at the managerial situation, and personally, I think that they thought it was. We don't know how the situation went with Gerrard, but I think that they knew that was the front runner and the other people were just being interviewed as backup options as a possibility. Now it seems that they're having to cast the net further and definitely wider. There's definitely more names coming up. This could all be just paper talk, though. They're just scanning Twitter and just throwing things out there. It's imperative we get a manager in place for Dundee United, I think. The league, as yourself and the guys have discussed, in recent weeks, despite how far behind we are, it does feel that the league's not over yet. They're not a great side at the minute. I think, realistically, the only side that's been really that consistent is probably Hearts. But we know from history that that's possibly likely to fall off. So I think that every 3 points, potential 3 points, is precious at the minute, considering we've only got one win under us this season, which obviously came away from home. Yeah, I do feel we need a manager in place now. However, doesn't mean you just choose anyone.
Sorry, struggling to go off mute there. Thank you, mate. Thank you. If I was to ask you, right, come Saturday, and I'm going to ask you all the same question, right? We've got a manager in for Saturday. And obviously we've got the top two here, Danny Rowe and Derek McInnes are the two that split it. Would you fancy us to win more under Danny Rowe? Would you fancy us to win the game under Derek McInnes, or both?
I think both. I think just a change from the anti-football, I think, would. We've got some good players in that team. You see every time they go out for international duty, they're generally scoring or assisting. We've got some good players in there. It just needs a good manager to manage them properly and use them to their strengths. Brilliant. Doug, same question to you, mate. Is it vital that we've got a manager in for Saturday? Would you trust the likes of
Stevie Smith to take it. I've had a text message tonight saying there's a possibility Neil McCann might be asked to look after the team on Saturday as well. There's another one. What do you think yourself, mate?
But obviously, the sooner we get someone in, the better. So the ideal scenario is you have someone in place, but it's more important to get make the right decision than to make it super fast. So I'd rather they take the time to do it right if that's what's needed. I'm fine with an interim. The guys that are there, the coaching team, I'm sure that they're capable. The players should be good enough. I mean, this is part of the problem under Martin. The players should be good enough to not really require that much direction. You should be able to put 11 of that squad out, and they, can handle themselves with a bit of light direction. So I'd be fine with that. Obviously, if McCann comes in, that's fine. That'd be great as well. Obviously, with him having a little bit of the previous there too. So I'm not too pressed about it, but it can't be much longer if it's going to be that. You asked between the two of them. I think the chances are equally likely, because at this point, by the time say they announce it tomorrow, by the time it's sorted, they're in. It's probably largely going to be whatever plan the guys who are currently coaching them have been doing with them anyway. The manager will be spending this week getting to know them and probably watching them mostly to see what he's got under his belt. So I don't think getting the manager in this week is going to really change a huge amount. Maybe he has one or two things, but I would imagine he'll mostly, certainly that's what I would do. I would come in and go, you guys just kind of carry on with what you've been doing and let me see what's what, and I'll kind of chip in, and then it would be starting properly from then. So, yeah.
Similar to what Gio, I think, was Gio not in the stand for the semi-final that we lost 3-0?
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of similar idea as that. As much as we wanted him to go and boot the door down at half time and go, right.
And he may well have gone down at half time, and that's something that the new manager might do in terms of the leadership stuff we've been talking about. That's something they might do, particularly if they're not doing well. But I would have thought the smart thing would be to go in and get the lay of the land, because there's no point in going in and trying and installing stuff with a bunch of group of people you've no idea who they are and everything else. So,
yeah, Ross, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, a slightly different question there. What do you think Ibrox's going to look like on Saturday? There's no doubt in my mind the place would have been filled to the rafters, an absolute sellout. There wouldn't have been an empty seat in the house had Steven Gerrard became the Rangers manager again and accepted the opportunity to come back, but he's not. And, in the same token, the place would have likely been pretty much empty had Russell Martin still been in position. What do you think Ibrox is going to look like? I think it's going to be quite a strange atmosphere come Saturday. It's something I don't really know what to expect, to be honest.
I think it probably depends on how the next couple of days play out. I think that even if there's not a manager in place, but there's clear signs that there's something in the works and something, perhaps close, then it might encourage people to go and support the team. I think that if you look at it, and let's just say in a hypothetical scenario, let's say it's Stephen Smith, people aren't going there to go and, support Stephen Smith, but what they're going to do is going to support the team and understand that, right, that's fine, you've made a mistake, this is a fresh start, we'll get behind the team now, and then come next Monday, the new guys in, and it's go time. Excuse me. So I really think it's going to depend on how the next couple of days play out. But if it comes to Wednesday, Thursday, and we're still here and there's been nothing really, I think people are going to be kind of have the idea in their head that what they're playing out here, what's really going on here, and has this been taken? No, it's not been taken seriously, but what's kind of why are we still in this position that 2 weeks after sacking a manager, we've had a knockback, and within a week you managed to bring one guy to the table, almost seal the deal. It didn't happen. You've then had another week and there's been no progress. What's kind of how do we deal with that? So I think it's really going to depend. I'm going to go. I was really against going if Russell Martin was still in a job. I wasn't going back until he'd left. But I think now it's a case of, right, that's done. It's time for a fresh reset and to go again and support the team.
Yep. You with that, Andrew? My question is that if we don't have a manager in place and we lose that kind of, if we don't see ourselves taking 3 points on Saturday, for me, it's pretty much done. Assuming, obviously, that other teams above us do the business as well. I still believe we've got a chance here. And given the fact that what's actually going on above us is not perfect. We're not seeing teams above us firing all cylinders. But what does success look like now, given where we are this season? Are we focusing our efforts on cup success? Do we put a wee bit more effort into Europe? Do we still try and go for this league? Where does success now lie for you? What does it look like now for us?
I think a version of success this season would be both cups and last stages of Europe, and I think you could class that as some sort of success because, yeah, we win the odd trophy every now and then, but winning the Scottish Cup and the League Cup, I think, would really put whoever's come in, put their stamp on the team and show what they're going to do next season. Yeah, I think that would be a minimum, because I think the league is almost not an impossibility, like we said, but you never know what can happen the other end of the city. They might just suddenly click and batter everyone every game, because it's all different variables. We can only do what we can do now, and I think what we can do is win that League Cup, Scottish Cup, and get to the last stages of Europe, even if it is just the next round. Just try and get out of this mire that we're in.
Yeah, I think it's more winning the pride games more than anything else. Re-establishing ourselves, get Ibrox back to being a fortress. Actually make it a place where people are coming, they're scared to play against us. You're seeing teams coming out and they're playing their normal game against us rather than this whole. And as much as we don't want to see teams coming and park the bus against us, we do want to see teams coming and being worried about us and being fearful of us. Doug, before I come to you, mate, I've just got one last question for you, mate, and I know you were something else, your point you wanted to raise. We've got a new sponsor, guys, that you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, Bluebell's Bar, Porto del Carmen in Lanzarote. So I'm sure plenty of you are thinking about disappearing over the next week or so for the October holidays. You will find no better Rangers Bar in the Canary Islands to go and enjoy a couple of beers. They serve the most wonderful looking cocktails, and please drink responsibly if you do happen to go and enjoy yourself, unlike our leader Scotty, who I can't say he's been drinking responsibly this week, but certainly has been out and enjoying himself with his family and much of a well-earned break for himself. So if you doubt and you're in Lanzarote and you're looking for somewhere to go and watch the game, go and pay Kenny and the team a wee bit of time and a bit of visit there and proudly support them as much as they've supported us there. And again, there's plenty of, again, plugging ourselves here. There's 600 odd guys watching on X and there's only 100 watching on YouTube, guys. Please get yourselves over to YouTube. If you watch us on X, I'll be honest, we don't get any money from you. So if you watch us on YouTube, you give us a few quid, then it obviously pays for things to get bigger and better. You'll see our new graphics and stuff like that, which don't always come free of charge, and it makes the channel better. So we, very much appreciate your support. So like and subscribe on YouTube, hit the wee bell to let us know when you guys know. Sorry, when we're going to come live. Doug, you had a point you wanted to raise earlier on. I think it was something to do with managers' win percentage you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, it's something that's been grinding my gears over the last couple of days. Using win percentages in isolation to judge a manager. So someone had put in the comments earlier about, in reference to Roll, about his, I think it's 33 or thereabouts % win percentage, and saying, that's not the right level for Rangers manager. So there we go. 30% win rate isn't a Glasgow Rangers manager, is it? We've had managers before that have had less win percentages coming into the job, in part because they've never managed before. We've had managers with similar win percentages, and we've had managers with better that have done worse. We have to take into account the context of that percentage. So obviously he's managing Sheffield Wednesday. They're not certainly not right now. Not a dominant team. They're not a team that's expecting to be winning the majority of their games, because that's not where they are. They don't have the players. They've not got the budget to do that. When he took them over, they were in the relegation zone, and they looked shoo-ins to be getting relegated. And he took them and pushed them out of the relegation zone, and then finished them in a top half finish. And within that context, that's the thing that we need to be looking at, is that, okay, and how did he do that? Well, he did that by being tactically flexible, changing things in game to allow them to win matches. He did that by, he actually came in initially saying he wanted to play a certain way, but then a few weeks down the line said that he'd abandoned that because he didn't have the players to do it. Can you imagine if Russell Martin had done that with us? So this is a guy that looks at what he has and makes decisions based practically on that. And again, that's something that I think we want. because that was a huge fail in Russell Martin. He came in, he was trying to do things. It clearly wasn't working, but he wouldn't change it. So I think we need to, when we're going to assess these managers, we can't just pick one singular thing and go, I don't like him because of that. We need to broaden it out and look at these individual things in combination. Because again, like Ro, you can criticise him because he's not got a lot of managerial experience, and that's fine. That's a valid criticism. But then you also look at, well, he's got, as I say, 15 years worth of coaching experience or behind the scenes experience within clubs, which is also valid, and something to take account of. And people, if you look at someone like, again, well, let's just compare him again to Russell Martin, because a lot of people are comparing him to Russell Martin and saying he's the same as Russell Martin. Russell Martin had more managerial experience. He'd managed, obviously, with Swansea, MK Dons as well. But he had no managerial experience at an elite level, and he had no managerial experience in like elite competitions. And again, although Rowe wasn't the manager, he was an assistant manager to a Bayern Munich team that won the Champions League, the Cup Winners' Cup, gone back a bit, the Club World Cup, the Super Cup, two league titles, and 2 domestic trophies. You can't say he won't have learned huge amounts from that, and under the managers that he was in. So, yeah, it's just something I wanted to touch on, because it's been a big thing across Twitter today, in the last few days. With Rowe in particular, people just smashing him with Russell Martin and saying they're the same manager. But I just think there's so much more to it than that, and we need to, if we're going to get the right person, you have to be taking that holistic view of the person and going, right, what are their personality traits? Because I think those are really important for the Rangers manager, maybe even more so than some of the technical traits. But then looking at the technical traits and going, right, what are the combination of things? Because we're not going to get a manager that has everything we want, because unfortunately we're just not in the sphere to do that anymore. If we got a manager that had everything we wanted, we'd be getting a Pep Guardiola, kind of manager. The manager is going to have some deficiencies somewhere, because if he didn't, he wouldn't be coming to Scotland. We've seen it before with players as well. Malik Tillman, for example, liked the club but didn't want to play in Scotland, and so he didn't come back. Managerial appointments will be the same. So there's going to be things that we don't like. But if you just pick out one thing and go, no, it's not good because of that one thing, we'll never get anywhere.
Well, that's that, guys. That's that. It's nothing really more to add on that. I think we're in for a long week, Bears. I think we're going to be quite quiet, and this might just come out the blue. No pun intended. But thanks for everything. Thanks for the pod tonight. Thanks for everyone who's contributed, and lots of comments there. Some I'll agree with all. I can't agree with everybody, and not everyone will agree with us. But Ross, Andrew, Doug, thanks very much for your time tonight, guys. And as I say, there's still too many people watching on X. Get yourselves over to YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Do us a wee favour. If you can do anything, you can help a fellow Rangers fan. All right, guys. But thanks very much. Take care. Good night. Every night is a Rangers Journal night. All the best.
Every night is the Rangers Journal night.